jewellery for his girlfriend, who was an American actress, for when she was in London. It's a 1939 Wraith with a Parker Ward Pullman limousine body, 4.2 straight-six engine, fully electric vanity windows, rear curtains, all of that. At the time, this would have been the finest car in the world at the time. It was damaged by a Luftwaffe bomb outside a club in Pall Mall in 1941.
Oh, goodness.
Repaired by Rolls-Royce, hand-picked by Winston Churchill, used by Winston Churchill, and then Winston Churchill directed Field Marshal Montgomery to use it as soon as he could, once he'd broken through the beaches after D-Day, to convey a sense of victory, power and permanency and confidence. Because that car driving over the beach, I mean, look at that grille, that's like Whitehall driving over the beach.
It really is super.
And so it was put over Juno Beach at D+3, 9th of June 1944. It was used by Monty when he was behind the front line, so when he was in the sort of rear area reviewing troops, doing any state level work. So your grandparents, great-grandparents, great-grandfather would have been in this car. Eisenhower was in this car. Churchill used it a lot. Even de Gaulle would have been in this car. Probably Stalin as well, because we were allies back then. And then it was used as a staff car for the Supreme Allied Command of Europe all the way through to the 60s, where it was then given back to the army, retired to a Royal Corps Transport Museum, which then became the Royal Logistic Corps, and that is how it's found its way into the museum at Worthy Down. As I say, it's still a working vehicle, it's still used for royal duties, for royal visits, and then this past year we've had it restored by Richard Hammond. You'll remember Richard Hammond from Grand Tour, Top Gear, and his later series, Richard Hammond's Workshop. So this car forms, and its story of, its story, the restoration, it being ready for DD80, that forms the tenet of his next series.
But I gather you had a bit of a problem with the logistics or nearly with the logistics last night. Fuel.
We had fuel. We had a fuel issue. Then we had a which elms are we going to issue. But we got there in the end.
We'd like to start things off today. I'd like to introduce you to Mark Thistlewaite, who's the owner of Southwick Estate, the Squire, as we call him. And he'd like to say a few words of welcome and introduce you to Southwick Estate. And then I'm going to give you a short briefing before we get on the buses. Mark.
Thank you very much. Well, as Martin said, welcome. We're absolutely delighted to see you here. You're adding a whole level of authenticity and upgrades on what Martin's been able to achieve before, which is in itself fantastic. I think you're aware we're going to do a little tour up to Southwick House, our old family house that some of you are responsible for us not being in anymore, and then on to where the generals had their encampments and things. We'll see from there, and then back to the village. You will see during the day, practically the whole of the village will dress up, and they really get involved in this, and that's what makes it such a success and such a fun thing for the village, is the fact that it is a huge community event. Of course, we are commemorating and reliving sort of what happened 80 years ago, but for us it's all really about the revival of the spirit that was here at D-Day and in the Second World War, and we've tried to keep going thereafter. You'll notice in the village we don't have things like sort of yellow lines and everything else. We keep our old post boxes and everything else, and so in many ways we are still stuck in the 40s and perhaps the 50s, and we like it that way, and we hope you'll really enjoy today and tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. What we need to do now is board the transport. So we have, as you know, Monty's Rolls-Royce here, so we're going to ask Henry.
Henry's just got to get his hat.
Okay, so Henry, when he's got his hat, here he is. So if Henry, Richard, Will and Susan would like to ride in the Rolls-Royce, and then out in the roadway here we have two vehicles. They're the Shoot buses. We'd like the more senior in the front bus, and the younger element in the rear bus. This is for reasons of comfort. I don't care the descendants of whatever ranks you are. If I say we've got to get on the bus, we've got to get on the bus. Is that clear? Yeah. Excellent. Away we go. Or should I say, okay, let's go. Very good.
There we go. And then what we do is we lift the security to come and try and join us.
And then the other one was bought by
And I'd be down in the very
And then we've got suspension control, complete and set to soft.
Look over my shoulders, please, if you would, please. Thank you very much indeed. Keep it like that, please. Keep it. Make sure we're all
Because I think he's other than.
Oh, that's good. Right, and you know there's quite a crowd coming up on the shoot bus. I've now been told by...
one of our
please.
I'll give you the hands on the...
Hands on.
Yeah, hands on the... Because that's how the message...
Lockheed Martin have very generously sponsored Southwick Revival since we began, which was 10 years ago, to mark the 70th anniversary of D-Day. So we're very grateful to you, and we hope that it'll be an enduring partnership.
Yeah, I mean, Lockheed's been involved, you know, from the very beginning. Despite our Hudson bombers, you know, to this endeavour, right up till now. And if you go down to the docks down at Portsmouth, you know, you'll see our F-35 jump jets on the carrier. You'll see the Merlin Mark II anti-submarine warfare capability. Only 12 miles down the road is 470 British passport holders supplying capability to keep our nation safe today, as we have since you know, when we were called to help in this endeavour. I am proud. 1,600 people that work for Lockheed Martin are proud of our history and our continuing support of keeping what we hold and what some brave people that went before us made sure that the freedoms we have today are kept. You know, that's our promise to the nation, and I'm really, really pleased to be here today and delighted, so thank you.
D-Day and Normandy was the most complex operation ever mounted in human history. And it staggers me to this day, the level of planning that was required. And I paid tribute particularly already to Admiral Sir Bertrand Ramsay, but I also wanted to pay tribute to a man called Eisenhower, because without Eisenhower we would have lost the Second World War. My nose Susan's going to blush. Ike was an incredible man, absolutely incredible. My admiration for him has grown over the years that I've studied him. He was influenced by a man called Fox Connor, who was a major general that the Americans almost forgot, a bit like Ramsay. And he created the winning team for the Second World War by selecting people like George C. Marshall, George S. Patton Jr., Lucian Truscott, names that you'll all be familiar with, and of course Ike. And he took Ike down to Panama as his executive officer and schooled him to fight a coalition war with allies. So when Ike came here to command the European theatre of operations for the Americans, he was well prepared. But it was his nature and his character that carried a very fractious coalition to its glorious conclusions in 1945. Now, Ike had an enormously bad temper, I think that's true. And he spent his entire life trying to control it. And occasionally here, under the great stresses and strains that he was under, it would flash up. He was smoking 4 packets of cigarettes a day, Camel, I understand. Was it? Untipped, I was told. He was sleeping little, eating little, and he was playing a tinnitus in his right ear. And of course here, he made the decision first to postpone the invasion and then to launch it. And I think that was a decision that weighed heavily on him. The final thing I'd like to say is the third person, or fourth person in my liturgy, if you like, is James Stagg. And James Stagg was a Doer Scott, selected to be the senior meteorological advisor to Eisenhower. And the Brits were determined that Eisenhower had to be briefed by one person, because we all have a view about the weather. Stagg was not a meteorologist, he was a geophysicist, but he and Eisenhower struck a very, very close and trusting relationship. Because Eisenhower had to base the decision on the optimum weather forecast for all the components in this operation. The Navy wanted something different from the Army and so on and so forth. And Stagg describes the general's eyes, they were like barometers. You have a military man, an utter professional soldier like Eisenhower, and a civilian meteorologist, a scientist. And that key relationship, those two men, and I think the impact of the D-Day decision on both of them was profound. And I'm just glad that it was pre-computer, it was worked out with a pencil, and they got it right, and thank God they did. So thank you for coming, and thank you especially for coming to represent your amazing ancestors and relatives. And Will's smiling all over his face, just like his dad. Grandfather.
The red lines on the map are swept convoy routes. Originally in red tape, we've got some very, very faded pink tape at the front here. Ramsay's plan, 1,150 pages long, could actually be distilled onto the back of an envelope.
So, I'm such an admirer of Admiral Ramsay. So I have a link to this. Well, we had a wonderful morning this morning. Truly, I learned so much about Southwick House and the lands around it, and about where my grandfather's encampment was in the days leading up to D-Day. This is going to be one of the most memorable trips I've had here to this facility, and I just am full of gratitude.
Well, it's been really great to be here and actually to meet the grandchildren, well, the son of Tedder and the grandson of Ramsay and Susan Eisenhower, who's Ike's granddaughter. So, and it's been a privilege to sit with them and actually talk with them and just imagine what it was like for our respective relations on 80 years ago. What do you think, Belle?
Well, and we've also seen, we've been in the map room, which is extraordinary, and heard the stories of how the plans went. We've learned about the forecast. We've been into the woods to see Eisenhower's encampment, which is incredible. We've also been lucky enough to see where our grandfather was based, and where his caravans were. And so it's been absolutely illuminating to just understand what was going on and how they were preparing for the momentous events on the 6th of June.
Yeah, and hear new stories that we've not heard before.
No, it's been
great.
really interesting.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Lucy, you're not allowed to tell me what bits are wrong, because I know it's all wrong.
I'm going to photograph you and send it to the Lord Lieutenant. You'll get a bollocking.
Blackadder one. Another one.
Another one.
Bangor, May?
No, North Wales.
North Wales.
Yeah, she's Welsh speaking, and she was tiny, and your grandfather called her the little Welsh girl. She was working. You can read that.
Thank you very much. I so appreciate it.
It's been on the television in Wales.
Wonderful.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Southwick. As you all know, and the reason you all gathered here is that we have what is a world first, really, because we have gathered together the descendants of the four supreme commanders of D-Day who were taking those momentous decisions of 80 years ago in Southwick House, just near where we're standing now. And we're honoured also to have Vice Lord Lieutenant Charles Ackroyd, who's representing His Majesty here today, and he's going to say a few words of introduction before we ask the granddaughter of the Supreme Commander of D-Day, General Dwight D. Eisenhower, to officially open the Southwick Revival 2024.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, and welcome to Southwick and the Lockheed Martin Southwick Revival. This event has been happening over many years and has a national, if not global, reputation. And certainly this year is no different. And it's wonderful to see so many people here, all dressed immaculately in a variety of uniforms from the Allies and elsewhere. It's my very great pleasure to introduce Susan Eisenhower, the granddaughter of the Supreme Commander, to formally open this event and to give her perspective on what is happening today and happened some 80 years ago. Good.
Well, first I would like to start by thanking the organizers of the Lockheed Martin Southwick Revival. I'm not sure any of the organizers understand how deeply meaningful this is for me and my family. To come back here is to come back to one of the most iconic strategic leadership sites in the globe. And I want to express my deepest thanks to our veterans and to those who were here at the time who offered support, good nature, and a commitment to the Allied cause, of course. You know, the thing about strategic leadership is it brings with it a different kind of stress and strain. We've talked so much about the physical heroism and the resiliency of our Allied troops. But sometimes it's hard for others to imagine that taking on the intellectual and the strategic burden can bring with it special stress and difficulties as well. I think what I want to leave you with is my own view that what happened here was nothing short of a miracle. Think about how many Allied countries were involved in this operation, and when it came time for the Supreme Allied Commander and his own commanders that sat at that table and made these decisions, you must know that we came from different cultures. We had different views about how warfare is thought. We had different cultural traditions. But this was the melding. This was the moment when our countries came together for always. I want to thank you again for this opportunity to speak on behalf of the Eisenhower family, but more important, of my grandfather. I'm so pleased that I had the opportunity to know him well, and I can tell you, you were always in his heart. Thank you.
Okay, let's go. Carry on, as you were.
Going to America on Tuesday.
Oh, good. Where are you going?
My son lives in Miami. Oh, very good. Thank
Before
you.
you
Lovely
go
to
your
meet you.
separate ways,
I want to say
can
thank
I
you very
just,
much for
on
coming.
your
It's
behalf,
lovely to
thank
see you here.